All right, so now that I showed you how to use a content library and upload data and ultimately be able to load data into a Qlik Sense app, you're probably asking, how can I start to roll this out to the individual teams? I'm probably going to need to apply some sort of security roles, and that might get a little unwieldy. Well, let me show you a good way and a good best practice that you can use with a mixture of the security roles as well as custom properties. So if you're not very familiar with custom properties, they're basically inherent to Qlik, where you can create these own attributes or properties and be able to assign them to any sorts of resources within Qlik. And a resource can be a data connection, it could be a user, it could be a stream, really anything within Qlik. So I'm going to go and show you here custom properties, and I've created this team content library admin custom property. Really rolls off the tongue there. And you see that I've assigned it to a few different resource types of content libraries, data connections, and users. And I just gave it two values for right now, the HR team one and procurement. Okay, so now I'm going to use those custom properties, and I'm going to start to assign those to the different resources. But before I do that, I want to go and show you one individual user. So I have this local user HR user 1. Now let's assume that HR user 1 is is part of human resources, and they're kind of the Qlik team admin who is going to be uploading files and creating applications. So instead of me giving this user complete access to everything, I may just want to limit their access to just this content library within the management console. So I'm going to pop over into a different browser where I am logged in as HR user 1, and you'll see that if I go to the management console, and I'll just go ahead and refresh this, you can see within the QMC that user doesn't have any access. Okay, we're going to go ahead and change that. Also, if I would try to load in data as that user, you'll see that there is actually no shared files that user has access to. And that's because just by default, Qlik's inherent security rules are that you don't get access, you have to be generally granted access to something. All right, so let's go back, and now that I showed you that user, we're not just going to assign customer properties and everything's going to work magically. We do have to set up a few security roles. So going to security roles, I basically have three different roles that I wanted to show you. And the first one is granting QMC access. So what this is doing is it's saying that, hey, if the user has any sort of team content library admin custom property assigned to them, they should have QMC access to the content library. Okay, so that's the first role. That's going to just allow them to get access to the QMC. The second role is going to be around the data connection. And what this is going to do is says, hey, if the user has the property of a team content library, so such as the HR one, and it matches that custom property that's assigned to the resource, so in this case, the resource is going to be the data connection. As long as those equal, then the user should have rights to access that. Okay, and that's again within the data connections side. And lastly, the content library itself. It's very similar to the data connection one, where it's checking to say if the resource, which in this case is the content library, if that custom property matches the custom property that the user has, then in that case, we want to go ahead and grant them access. Okay, so those security roles will allow you to be pretty flexible, so that you can simply just assign those custom properties to the different resources instead of having to create a separate security role for each individual data connection and each individual user, etc. Okay, so let's go ahead and assign those custom properties. So if you've never done that, it's super simple. In this case, I'll go into this HR user 1. I'll assign them the HR content library admin. I'll do the same thing on the content library. And I'll also do the same thing on data connections. Now, of course, this is a very, very simple example. You may want to make this more complex. Maybe you want certain people to manage the data connections, being able to load the data, whereas other people, you may want to limit how many people can actually upload to the content libraries. So of course, you can always customize this as much as you want, but this is just a simple example. So now if I go back to the HR user 1, and I'll go ahead and refresh within the management console, you'll see that that user now has access to content libraries. And in there, they can see the default library. This is actually a default role that is implemented whenever you install Qlik. You can simply disable that if you don't want them to be able to view that default content library. But here we have that HR team content library, and because they have the rights to, they can come out here, they can upload contents to that. So I'll go ahead and upload a new file to that. So maybe I'll add in this recipients file, I'll upload it there. So just to show you that that works. And now if I come back to file locations, let me go and refresh here. Now I'll go and load in some data. Still logged in as that HR user 1. Go to file locations. We can see now I have access to that HR team content, and there's the different files that I can load in. Now just to show you how easy it is, if I go back to the other custom, remember I had 2 custom properties. If I assign that same custom property to this user, maybe add them to the procurement team content library. I'll go to the content libraries. You can see that that procurement team content library custom property is already assigned there. And now if I go back to the user, pop back to content libraries, we'll see that that user now has access to the procurement team content, just because we assigned that additional custom property to the user. All right, well, so hopefully you learned something today, and thanks for joining in.